Welcome to the Three Man Coverage Podcast. I'm Freddie. This is Yen. This is Gino. First quarter of the season is done. It's in the rearview mirror, so hopefully your fantasy team is holding up. Boys, how are we doing today?
Yeah, good. Good to be back on the winners list in our main league after losing 2 in a row. Nice convincing win for me, albeit another donut from my best mate Mark Andrews, but I'm not going back there anymore. Like you said, it's in the rearview mirror. He's going to come out absolutely flying for the rest of the season. Yeah.
What's happening, Yen?
A little bit of mixed feelings for me. Adulation because I came from behind and pipped my victory in one of them, but then a little bit of, depression considering the injuries that I've copped in the second league. With Rashee Rice going down and Josh Allen just playing his first stinker for the year, amounted to 65 points after averaging 130 every game. So, yeah, mixed feelings, but that's fantasy.
I've had a stellar week in fantasy. All three of my leagues, I've actually got the W. I was at risk. I thought maybe with James Cook playing yesterday, and my opponent had another player with only David Montgomery to play. I thought I was going to be behind the eight ball, but they had an absolute stinker yesterday in that Bills-Ravens game. So glad to see that I got the win in Montgomery, 15 points for me this week. So I'm happy with that. In another league, absolutely smashed my opponent, and then the third league as well. So I had a really stellar week, which is good. And then my team also got the first W for the season. So yeah, even though I picked against them. So good to see. All right, boys, we're going to start with waiver wire ads as we did last week. Anyone that pops off the charts for you after 4 weeks? Maybe even someone that's popped off the charts this week that you'd probably want to reach and get in the waiver wire.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty significant one. And he is on the Chiefs roster, especially given the injury to Rice. I think Kareem Hunt is going to be very highly sought after, especially after Steele had an early fumble in that game and was not seen on the field again after that. Hunt collected 17 touches, 14 carries, and 3 targets after that. Obviously, he's quite familiar with the Chiefs offense as well. So I think moving forward until Pacheco is back, I think Kareem Hunt is a huge must-add, especially in that high-powered offense that may look now to dump off. Mahomes may look to dump off a lot more checkdowns, and we know what Kareem Hunt can do and has done for that team in the past.
Yeah, just on that too. So interesting to see that Carson Steele had a fumble, because in the Chiefs-Bengals game, he actually had a fumble too in that game. So he's had 2 in 4 games, and they actually benched him this game. So I'll take your word for it. But in that game against the Bengals, they actually brought him on. So it'd be interesting to see how his confidence is after that game then. So particularly when they picked up Kareem Hunt off the street.
Well, exactly. Yeah. And I guess more to the point where you were sort of saying that for someone who's actually bobbed up this week, well, this was obviously his first game, I think, this week from memory. I don't think he had much playing time last week, but yeah, it was a pretty significant role in his first game back. So I think he will be highly sought after.
I reckon if you hadn't picked him up or you hadn't drafted him, and I can understand why, but for me, the Minnesota Vikings defense, I actually picked them up a couple of weeks ago because I drafted the Dolphins. I don't know why, but I thought they had a couple of edge defenders. But when you look at the Vikings front, they've got nothing on there. Like some household names in terms of the secondary, but they are they don't have like a JJ Watt on the edge or a Myles Garrett. So they're getting the job done. And over the first 4 weeks, they are defense number 1 in terms of fantasy. So 17 sacks, 8 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles, and a defensive touchdown. So they're doing really well. So if you're looking for someone to stream this week and they're still on the waiver wire, go ahead and pick them up, because I think Fantasy Pros had them only 36% were starting in rosters across the league. So yeah, I think they're a great get. And now I see their ascension now because they're on a winning formula. They're 4-0. One of the only teams with 4-0 at the moment. So, yeah, any thoughts on waiver wires?
There's a couple. The first one for me would be Wan'Dale Robinson. If I could just read off his stats. In week 1, he had 12 targets. Week 2, 4 targets. Week 3, he had 8 targets. And week 4, he had 14 targets. He's only caught the 1 touchdown in that entire time, but he is getting a lot of reception. So in a PPR format, excellent to have. and Malik Neighbors potentially being in concussion protocol. I mean, more attention will go to him, but can he handle the number one wide receiver spot? Who knows? It's yet to be determined. I think he probably plays better as a wide receiver too, behind Malik Neighbors, but so far this season he's been really, really good. The other one as well would be Dontavian Wicks. I think it's clear now that he's the wide receiver number 2. This week he had 13 targets for 78 yards and 2 touchdowns. I really think the offense is going to be built between him and Jalen Reed. So I think if you need a wide receiver, I think they're the 2 main ones to actually target. And then potentially a deep, or wait and see how he goes now again under Andy Dalton, is Xavier Leggetti. Is that how you say his name?
Leggett, yep.
10 targets this week, 6 receptions for 66 yards. Last week was a little bit quiet, but if there's an uptick in his production, I mean, he was one of their early picks last year. If he features more, he might be someone to keep an eye on as well.
Yeah, and Deontay Johnson, just on the back of that, went out with the game, so there's a little bit of a cloud over his status this week. So if you're looking to pick him up and whether that lingers, I'm not too sure on the injury that Deontay Johnson's got, but if it does linger around, Leggett could be just sitting there on your bench and could be a flex player for anybody on the buys. I like that pick. Any other waiver wire ads that our 58 listeners would consider?
Well, if we're to consider anyone and you need to stream someone at quarterback, maybe the front runner for MVP after week 4, Sam Darnold.
Water.
He's going as well as their defense, so you can't blame how he's gone. Right now, you'd probably say statistically he's better than Josh Allen after this week.
Yes, he is doing very well. And I got to say, though, that the Minnesota offense, they do very well to protect them. I saw in that game against the Packers that a lot of swing passes, a lot of screen plays, and they only will target downfield if Justin Jefferson's got one-on-one. So it's a very safe game plan. It looks a very complex game plan because you can see a lot of motion in their play. And Aaron Jones is running the ball behind that left side of the line with Christian Darrisaw there as their left tackle. They're just playing really good complementary football on both sides. So, yeah, I like Sam Darnold if you're looking to pick him up. So, but I would say that's probably a Kevin O'Connell influence there. And I think his offenses, no matter who's behind center at Minnesota, I think he just leads a good team. So it's a good get if you're a Vikings man. Anybody else, boys, before we move on?
I think they're the main ones. There's some good names there.
Cool. Let's do a week 4 review on last week and what we previewed last week. So Cowboys and Giants. So any key takeaways, guys, quickly?
Yeah, they both suck. That's it.
For me,
Malik Neighbors is a star. Malik Neighbors is an out-and-out superstar, and he might be in the conversation for best wide receiver in a couple of years. But the key talking point is that they both suck.
For me, being personally invested with the Dallas defense, there's a reason that they are ranked worst in the league for run D. And I saw that firsthand properly, during that game. They've now lost Lawrence, potentially for 3 to 4 weeks.
Yep.
Micah Parsons might be out this week too.
He is apparently 4 weeks.
Yeah, so for me, having them rostered is probably not going to be there for too much longer, I wouldn't have thought, especially with those 2 names out. But we'll wait and see. But yeah, as Jens said, they're both not very good.
Yeah, I think the Cowboys' defense would be dependent on that pass rush from the edges, right, with Lawrence and Parsons, like versus last year. And it loses me the corner's name that had the most interceptions. Yeah, Diggs. No, the other corner. What's his name in the played nickel? But anyways, they're very dependent on that pass rush, which actually gets that secondary into play.
Deron Bland.
That's it. Thank you. Which, as you would know, having the Cowboys defense rostered on as your fantasy team, they're just not getting it done. So I haven't really heard Parsons' name being called, nor his praises. So the flowers aren't being thrown his way. So Like you, yeah, and I'm going to piggyback off that. I think Malik Neighbors is a star. I took him in the 5th round in one of my leagues, and he has slowly made his way after week 2 into my lineup as a flex player, and he scored me 25 points this week. Interesting to note too that on social media, OBJ may have taken a shot at the Malik Neighbors while being at the Giants. I don't understand the context of it, but OBJ, he had his time at the Giants and he was a star when he was there, but Malik Neighbors, geez, he is in a similar mold, but maybe that's because of their rivalry. I don't understand what the rivalry would be because they went to the same school at LSU. So anyways, Malik Neighbors, it's your time to shine. Continue to do what you do because you're not going anywhere. So feel free to hit me up with a trade, boys.
Well, do you want to really listen to anyone who's a VIP member at the Diddy party? So who really cares what he has to say?
If you didn't say it, I was about to say it, so I'm glad you did.
All right, on that note, let's move on. Hey? Look, we touched on this before, guys, and we probably got a bit ahead of ourselves, but Vikings at Packers. Any key takeaways?
Well, I think for me now, with Christian Watson injured again, is he going to be one of those guys that's just going to continue to be on and off the field? I think that's pretty clear now. He is just made of glass, unfortunately for him, and he's still young, so he still might get his body right, but it's not looking good. Again, though, for owners of Jayden Reed, there are 2 games now of samples, I guess, with Jordan Love.
Is this a little self-indulgent?
This is 100% self-indulgent because I had a fairly robust discussion with our fellow host here about him, who doesn't like him, and that's fair enough. But I'm simply talking about the sample size of 2 games with Jordan Love. Averaging 30 points over 2 games with him is just massive. For me, it was another takeaway and another clear indication that he is the weapon to own at Green Bay. And I absolutely love seeing what he did during the comeback. And the Packers did well to come back in that game, obviously falling short. But yeah, they did quite well. And I think moving forward, the Packers are going to be one to watch in that, especially in that division. It's going to be an interesting finish.
2 games with Jordan Love, with 2 games with Jayden Reed, and they're both losses. Should they bring back Malik Willis? What do you reckon?
Look, I looked at the matchup history, and the Packers usually played well against them in the past. But I don't know, there's something different about this Vikings team. They are just playing as a complete unit on offense, defense, and special teams. My key takeaways are this. Any fears that we had of Justin Jefferson pre-season need to be dispelled. This guy is by far the best wide receiver in the game. He could probably play with the Spuds at Miami and still be a superstar. He's that good, for one. Like, he's making Sam Darnold's job easier. And as a result, because there's so much attention on him, even Jordan Addison looked good in his first game back. And they've still got TJ Hawkinson to come back. The other takeaway is, after that game, you would think that the Green Bay Packers would be rueing that they didn't sign Aaron Jones. Now, you could probably say he was injury prone, he was asking for too much money, and they thought Josh Jacobs would be an upgrade. But from what I've seen from Josh Jacobs at the moment, it's very underwhelming. And Aaron Jones has been arguably a top 5 running back so far this year. And it's been amazing. Like, it looks like the Aaron Jones of old. He doesn't look like he's lost a step. We thought he was going to be too old coming into this season, considering he was in his 30s and all the injuries he is going to have. But my God, he still looks as explosive as ever.
Can I piggyback off that for a second? So Aaron Jones is number 1 in the NFL for yards after contact. Who would have thought? I heard that after the game. Again, I don't have anything to do with Aaron Jones, but when I heard that, I was like, you know what? Good for you, man. Good for you, because a lot of people pot him for, many reasons, but he is number 1 in the league for yards after contact. So, yeah, he's playing very well.
Bit of resurgence there, right? Because probably the last 2 years you didn't really pop up the chart as a top fantasy running back, but according to Fantasy Pros, he's running back number 9 and running at 5 yards a clip over 64 touches. So he's doing really well. So, yeah. All right. Next game we previewed last week was the Bengals at Panthers. Now I'll put my hand up here as the resident fan of the Bengals. That the offense is carrying this team. The defense is shocking. It is shocking. The run D, we can't stop the run. So Chuba Hubbard, even that Panthers run game had over 130 yards rushing. If you go back to last week's game against the Commanders, they even rushed even more on me. So that's in the past that. But Burrow looks great over the last 3 weeks since the Kansas City game. Looks great. Other than that interception where he threw, which was a miscommunication because Chase should have kept running, but he instead bent it back, and Burrow knew that when he had thrown it, that it was going to get intercepted. So the offense is carrying, which is good to see, and that O-line, which has been the Achilles heel of this team since the Super Bowl 3 years ago, is looking fantastic. I think Orlando Brown is the number one left tackle in the league with a pass win rate. Last week, he had 100% pass win rate. I think he may have had the similar against KC, and he was really good at this past game as well. And our first round pick, Amarius Mims, who came in as the starting right tackle for us, and he was a right tackle at Alabama, had a really good game. Just smooth in his sets, just smooth in his arc. He looks really good as a right tackle, well beyond his years. And Jadeveon Clowney had nothing on him. I mean, he did beat him with one move, like when he went to the inside, but if you're trying to go around Amarius Mims when you're 6'8", 330, 40 pounds, and you move like the way he does, that O-line looks good, particularly on the edges there. So good to see if you're a Bengals fan to get that first dub, but I wouldn't get ahead of ourselves because we've got to go into the next game against the Ravens at home. Any takeaways, boys, from here?
You go, Ian.
No takeaways from me other than that the Bengals made Chuba Hubbard look like LaDainian Tomlinson, but other than that, I kind of expected the Bengals to win, and they did.
Good to see Chase finding some form, especially after the, I guess, early season woes. Good to see him finally hitting his stride and finding the ball in the end zone, which is what we're all used to seeing. So could be a mini spark for the Bengals moving forward.
And the Zach Moss experiment probably needs to end as well, I think.
Look, I think Chase Brown's the more explosive running back on that team, without a doubt. When he comes in, he's just like, he was on my bench. He scored 25 points on the bench, and last week I think he has 17, 18 points. So he's going to work his way into this team as the number one running back, but there is a complementary element there between both of them. Zach Moss gets the short yardage. He's a big, thicker back that can actually get that 1-2 yards, and there were a couple of times on the goal line where we used them. But when you need someone to actually run outside of the tackles, Chase Brown's your man, especially if he's running to the left or right side, particularly with those tackles that we have there. He's been really good. So probably one to look out for if you're looking to buy, hold, or sell. Like if you're looking to sell him while the iron's hot, and he's there, you can probably go for a mid-tier wide receiver if you're lacking there or a tight end. So one to watch. Eagles at Bucks.
Well, I mean, we kind of knew with the news of Smith not playing and AJ Brown not playing with their bye looming after this week that it was probably going to be a Bucks win. And look, the Eagles did actually quite well after the Bucks got out to, I think, a 24-3 lead or 24-0 lead from memory. So they did quite well to fight back into the game. I think it was a foregone conclusion with the Bucks win there. So the Eagles, a bit of that's exactly what it was. A pretty meh first 4 weeks for them. Now they go into their bye. I guess they get to regroup, get some, obviously their two top wide receivers back after the bye and go again. So we'll see how they go.
It wasn't close at all. It was 33-16. Baker Mayfield again putting on a show. They couldn't stop the run. Bucky Irving looks like he's going to supplant Rashad White. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin were back in form again. I mean, all Philadelphia really had was Saquon Barkley. Jalen Hurts, I don't know what's happened to him since that Super Bowl run. He looks like a shell of himself. And Sirianni, I don't know, his play calling. I've watched it the last couple of weeks. Not sure what he's trying to do. Looks like he's too adventurous, always wanting to go for it on fourth down. I don't know. There's just a lot of things not to like about the Philadelphia Eagles other than Saquon Barkley.
Is there something going on with Jalen Hurts? Because I think a few times in the game against the Bucks, he was just losing. Maybe that's his peripheral vision a little bit. Like, you have the defensive ends like bending the arc, and he's just sitting in the pocket there. And a couple of times we got sacked or he fumbled the ball. Even that escapability that we used to seeing since the Super Bowl is not there. So is he carrying something that we're not aware of? Because it doesn't look like the same Jalen Hurts from 2 years ago.
It's between the ears.
I was about to say the exact same thing. I think for him it's mental, because those couple of sacks that he got, especially the strip sack, he just seems to hang around in the pocket just for too long. And it's like, man, if there's nothing there, just get rid of it. Like, it's almost like he'd rather throw an interception than throw the ball away. Like, or make a mistake and throw the ball away. Like, I just don't get it. I don't get it.
Well, look, I will say this, though, because Lane Johnson, who's the All-Pro Hall of Fame right tackle for the Eagles for a day and an age, was actually out this game. So maybe the clock in his head while he was playing the game thought he had more time than he did have, like from the right side. But yeah, you haven't got Lane Johnson sitting out there, with all that time in the world sitting in the pocket. But I just thought, so maybe he's just a bit too comfortable and probably needed that clock ticking a bit faster. But I'm not seeing that escapability that I used to see from Hurts. So. But just to echo those sentiments too, I think Bucky Irving, he looked great. Mayfield, he's doing the job there. And Tampa Bay, they're just flying. They're just flying there. So that's going to be a pretty competitive division too, the NFC South, with the Saints and the Panthers. Like the way they actually played against the Bengals, and I know that the 10-point lead is not reflective of that, but they could actually cause some noise if they actually get some players back. Because there's a few people on an injury cloud at the Panthers, so be competitive. All right, guys, we'll move on to Bills at Ravens.
Well, you guys said it was going to be a Bills by a long way, and I said it was not going to be the case.
I didn't say by a long way, but
it was pretty close. Was pretty close, and I don't know. For me, seeing the Ravens finally get that run game going, and obviously it's 2 weeks in a row now where Henry's gone absolutely bananas. I kind of had a feeling that this might happen, and did it happen ever? They got smashed.
It reminded me of, and this is why it reminded me. Remember when the Bills played the New England Patriots? And who was it? Damien Harris just broke off for a run in the first play. It reminded me of the exact same situation because my opponent that year, Damien Harris is a flex, and it was game over after one play. And my opponent this week didn't have Derrick Henry, but they had Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens defense. And after Derrick Henry just went for 80 yards after one play, I was just like, okay, I just had flashbacks. It was like PTSD. It felt like the same things. I need to eat crow. I was wrong about Derrick Henry. I think he's the leading rusher now. He's had about 330 yards after 2 games. And I see next week he's also going to have another big game as well.
Monster game.
That's the thing, though. Look, their defense looked elite. They shut down Josh Allen. I think he's now 1-5 against them, or 1-6 now. He couldn't escape the pocket. When he did escape the pocket, he always had Kyle Hamilton chasing after him. He was all over the place. He was phenomenal. It has a lot to be desired about their passing attack, though. It's non-existent. I feel if you've somehow managed to nullify that Ravens run game, you can beat Baltimore. But I don't know what happened to the Bills' D in this particular game. I don't know what happened to the second coming of Ed Reed for Baltimore's defense either. But yeah, they were just shocking. Just all over the place. It just got beaten from top to bottom.
You could probably say that the Bills had a fairly easy go of it the first 3 games. Not necessarily, not fully easy, but yeah, I mean, they weren't super teams with great defenses and stuff like that. So the challenge was bound. I still think that the Bills are going to be thereabouts when the whips are cracking, just because of how well they seem to play when they are playing well. It's most likely though going to be a question of can they beat the teams come playoffs. So I still think the Bills have got a lot of improving to do as well. And as I said, I still think they'll be thereabouts. But the Ravens, yeah, they're starting to tick along now, just as I thought once Henry was acquired there.
There are a lot of things on Twitter saying how is it typical Josh Allen being erratic. Josh Allen wasn't erratic. He was just completely shut down. He didn't turn the ball over. He just literally could not do anything. And his wide receivers, I think, got a little bit exposed in this particular game, like Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman, even James Cook, who was like, he was the top 5 RB after 3 weeks. Got a little bit exposed against a good D, and this is a D that wasn't performing well. This was their best game for the year.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Just to touch on that, James Cook, 39 yards for the game. So he had a very quiet night, off 9 touches too. So and Lamar Jackson, QB6 according to Fantasy Pros for this week. Had a decent game, 24 points, but he does cement his place in the top 10 in terms of quarterbacks for fantasy. He's actually quarterback 2, according to Fantasy Pros. So, yeah, Baltimore riding a wave at the moment. So 2 wins on the trot, and they go into Cincinnati, and Cincinnati got a task on their hands against Derrick Henry. But the thing is, the Achilles heel for the Bengals is that, like Yen said, and it was actually a really good point, if you stop their run game, you have to force them into the pass. Very similar to last year, and they're built off a lead. So I don't know how Cincinnati are going to do it because they've got injuries in the interior defensive line. I think BJ Hill is back, but yeah, you need more than that. So cool. And the last one we'll go with is Seahawks-Lions. This was a cracker of a game. This was a shootout. And Seahawks tried to keep up with the Joneses, so to speak, with the Lions, but the Lions just too strong at the end of the day. So Goff, 18 of 18, 100% completion rate. So the wide receivers did their job, were catching everything that were coming their way, just under 300 yards, and just played a hell of a game. So Goff and the Lions, they get the dub. They go into their bye week next week, which is not great for me because I got Montgomery in 3 leagues. So he'll go down to the bench, and yeah, good win for the Lions.
Or to me, you could just dish him off now while he's on bye.
Yeah, we'll chat about that. We'll have a chat.
I actually look, the Lions seem like they're finally kicked into gear. I actually really like what I saw from the Seahawks, to be honest. Like, they were down, I think at one point by at least 2 touchdowns. It was definitely 14 points at one point. They actually rallied and they actually got going off the back of some good play from Geno Smith and obviously Kenneth Walker, and got themselves right back in the game. And unfortunately, one of our other league mates was kind of pulling his hair out a little bit as well when every time Kenneth Walker touched the ball, because he just was playing so well. And I mean, without laughing at that, you can't help it, because we've all lost in a fantasy game like that, where it's the last game of the round and someone just goes bang and you get pipped right on the line. But I actually really like what the Seahawks are doing. It's going to be hard to beat them in that division as well. I think it's actually going to come down to, the Cardinals are playing really well too, but the Seahawks, there's a lot to like about them. Even though they lost, they're sitting at 3-1. A lot more to come from that team, I think, moving forward as well. They're going to be one to watch.
It's the Seahawks and the Niners for me in that division. The Cardinals got absolutely the brakes beat off them with against, I was going to say the Redskins, but the Commanders, right? Like, that's I don't know about the Cardinals. I don't know whether it's the quarter. Sorry, I'm just going a bit head here, but Marvin Harrison Jr. is probably not doing it for me, if I'm being honest with you. If you're looking at rookie wide receivers, it's Malik Neighbors, but sorry, I'm going a bit ahead here. But Yen, any thoughts on Seahawks Lions game as well? Anything to touch on?
Kenneth Skywalker is an absolute superstar.
Oh
I am
gosh.
so thankful he's on my team. I came into today almost 40 points down, and I'll tell you what I do. I was tutoring at the time. And as I was tutoring my student, he's a year 12 student, I had my laptop open and I was looking at the scores going. So I was just looking at Gamecast, just with like the updates. So when I saw what Devon A-Chain's points were after halftime, and then I saw what Kenneth Walker was doing like in the first half, I'm like, yeah, that's it, game over. Gone. Stopped watching it, didn't pay attention, accepted the fact that I'd lost. So I had already congratulated my opponent. And then I went and did some shopping and so forth. And later on, he messaged me and he goes, F you, man, type thing. You and your wishing me good game early. I'm like, I had no idea what was going on. Scores, and I was like 0.5 down, and it was like 6 minutes to go. So
Ooh.
that's when I started watching again, and I started getting heart palpitations because that drive as well, they went 4 and out, and they didn't run it once. I'm like, all I need is like 5 yards, and I win the game. So they went 4 and out. Detroit gets the ball back, they score. So now I'm thinking I'm screwed because then there's no way they're going to run the ball from this point onwards. And
It's
they
game
didn't.
script.
They didn't run.
Yeah.
They didn't run the ball once. And there was one point they went empty backfield. They lined up Kenneth Walker on the far left. He went on the slant route, caught it, went for 10 yards, and that was game. So, and again, I would just like to say, if he was there for the week 2 and 3, he would be close to RB1. That's how good he has been in his first week, first 2 games. And also week 1, he didn't sit. He sat the last quarter with an injury and got 20 points. He's a star. He's so explosive.
Yeah, and you know what my key takeaway from that is? That you're fully invested in the children of the future, that you can just tutor and
It's called multitasking.
you can just sit there and check games and can get heart palpitations, not because your student is doing well or, has improved from week to week. It's because your fantasy team is on the line here. Have a look at him. Well done, mate. Well done.
We're in year 12. They'll be fine.
Anything else from the Seahawks-Lions game before we move on?
Those 2 teams will be 2 of the teams that are going to be thereabouts when it's playoff time, I think. I think we can all agree.
Great. This is probably game of the round for me. That was just back and forth. A lot of scoring, high scoring. Montgomery just continues to show me just the value that I picked him up in. So, yeah, he's just dangling there, just waiting for a nice offer to come through. So, yeah, we'll leave it there. Mm-hmm. All right, guys, something a little bit of fun. We'll go into the next segment. Who's who from the first 3 rounds of the draft? Who has hit that you've drafted in the first 3 rounds? Doesn't have to be anyone you drafted, but just anyone in general that's any part of your leagues. Or who has been underwhelming over the first?
Well, I think it's pretty clear to say that Saquon Barkley has been probably the biggest hit for the Eagles. Really, Brown has been out for 3 games now, I think. He's only played 1. Yeah. So Barkley, I think, has been the Eagles' offense, you could say. I know Dallas Goedert had a pretty good game last week in Brown's absence, but if you picked Saquon Barkley anywhere in the first round, I think he's been the biggest hit with the improvement in the O-line that he's running behind. He's super explosive, and I think moving forward, it's going to be pretty hard to get him out of the top 5 in fantasy running backs. So I think Saquon Barkley is the big one, or biggest one for me.
Given. Yeah.
Me, again, it's a biased pick because I got him and he fell to me and I reluctantly picked him up. It's Justin Jefferson. At the moment, he's about wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4. Probably really hasn't hit his stride yet, but if you're looking at it in totality, he's caught a touchdown in every single game. Yeah, and now that he's not, you probably won't have the focus because there's such a good, diverse offense at Minnesota. I think he's just going to hold him good for the rest of the season, and those big games are around the corner. I mean, he's averaging about 20 points per game. I think he's a big hit considering he was in the top 5 and then he fell. He just fell as soon as their rookie quarterback AJ McCarthy got injured. I think he's put a lot of owners' minds to rest with that pick.
QB proof. Yep.
Just on the back of that too, Ian, this is probably interesting to see. After 4 weeks, Justin Jefferson is wide receiver 3. He's 5 points behind Malik Neighbors, who is wide receiver 2. But he's had 29 targets and Malik Neighbors has had 23 targets more to be only 5 points behind. When he's at 18 yards per reception, that just shows you how effective this Minnesota offense is. and how effective he is as a wide receiver. Deep threat, intermediate threat, short threat. He is just the complete package. So to be 5 points behind and only have, 50% of the targets, thereabouts, 40% of the targets that Malik Neighbors has, what a get. And reluctantly, I was the one, he was sitting there for me, and I was like, nah, I just don't trust Darnold. What a shit show that's become for me. So, because I've got wide receiver issues, that's for sure, on my roster.
Mm-hmm. What do you reckon, Yen? What do you reckon? Jayden Reed for Jefferson?
Absolutely not.
Hey, Jayden Reed's wide receiver too, mate. Come on. Let's be real here.
No, he's 4.
4 for Fantasy Bros, yeah.
But that's all right. He's there. He's 69 points. But I would say, though, that Justin Jefferson sustained his points over 4 weeks, and Jayden Reed, like I was saying, week 1, it was skewed, and then you got love back, and, he scored again. But just Jay Jettas, man, all over that. Jayden Reed being at number 4, okay, great. But, man,
of course.
He's got nothing on Jay Jettas.
Nah, no way. No way.
Yeah, can I just throw one at you? Can I just throw one at you? Because you have him. How underwhelming has Breece Hall been?
I don't have him, but I'm a big
fan.
Oh,
you don't? Sorry, my bad. Yep.
I've got Bijan Robinson. Now, both Breece and Bijan have been, you could probably argue, the 1A and 1B, the most underwhelming players in this particular draft. Actually, 1C throw Tyreek Hill in it as well, but that's for different circumstances. Those two were projected to have astronomical years, considering how they finished as well, considering their stats and situations last year as well. If you think about it, considering how Breece Hall finished in his last 4 weeks last year, everyone was expecting both of these guys to be 1,000 guys, right? And they have not lived up to expectation. And to have 10 carries for 4 yards, and for Braylon Allen to look better in this offense in the last 2 weeks, it's scary. It's alarm bells. Now, Rodgers came out and said, yeah, I love Breece. We just need to give him the ball and blah, 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 blah. But, man, if you drafted him, and he was going forget about rankings, right? In most of the drafts that I saw, Bijan and Breece were getting drafted anywhere between 3 and 6, right? Mm-hmm. So to have that capital and to have 2 players that are getting you about 10 points, sometimes less per game, in this week's case, Breece Hall, it's scary. It's really scary because you can't really get much for them now as well, unless you take a risk and probably get I don't know, you wouldn't even I don't think a Brian Robinson Jr. would want to trade for one of these 2 players at the moment right now. But I mean, if you want to take a risk on a Jerome Ford and someone like a Brian Thomas, maybe. That's about it. They have lost their value massively.
I'll jump in on the back of that with Brian Robinson, touching on what we said before in yards after touch. Brian Robinson Jr. is 2nd in the league.
Behind Aaron Jones.
There is not a chance in hell, not just me, anyone would be getting rid of Brian Robinson Jr., especially with the way the Commanders are playing under Jayden Daniels. That offense is absolutely flying. And okay, Daniels is going to steal some touchdowns at the goal line and that sort of thing. But if you are a Breece Hall owner, for me it's panic stations, especially with the way Braylon Allen has been getting the ball and actually being a little bit more effective than him too. But in terms of your question, would you trade Robinson for Breece Hall? Absolutely not.
Yeah, you'd have to work on the upside, right? If I was negotiating Bijan or Breece Hall to actually take someone like a Brian Robinson, it'd be on the upside. And at the moment, as the weeks go by, the potential upside is probably diminishing, right? So it's on a week-to-week basis. And I've got Bijan, right? The production is there. It's just not translating into points. So the surprise with Atlanta at the moment is concerning for me because he is a first-round draft pick. And it's off the back of Atlanta also acquiring Kirk Cousins. They may have just free up the run game, especially behind that O-line, which is pretty stout. I mean, to trade Bijan for Brian Rowe is a straight up trade. You'd think about it, absolutely. You think about it, but if the iron is hot right now, right, like that offense at the Commanders over the last 2 weeks with the threat of Jayden Daniels there as a dual threat quarterback, like it just opens up options, right? And you can see it. Like Brian Robinson's running on the outside the tackle. He's running in between. He's a bruiser. Like he's an absolute bruiser. He reminds me of like an old school running back, right? Just he can just truck through people. So look, I would still consider. I'm not saying that Bijan's lost massive value over it, but it'd be on the potential that he would get better through the season just on recent production over the last 4 weeks. So that's where I stand with Bijan, just on the piggyback of that. For me, underwhelming. If you picked up Sam Laporta in the first 3 rounds, which he would have been a second round pick, I think he was tight end 1 as projected, I think, before the season. And I can understand why, because I actually picked up Sam Laporta last year off the waiver wire, right? After week 2. I remember it because I never value tight ends. I should value them because, you know, as you think about like your roster and how it's built, you've only got 1 tight end where you got, you know, 2 wide receivers. So, you know, I tend to think, you know, I'll wait till the later rounds and I can never hit on tight ends. But Sam Laporta was a hit for me last year off the waiver wire. This year, he has been underwhelming. He is tight end number 16, according to Fantasy Pros. He's averaging 5 points a game, 14 targets. He's caught most of them, so 12 receptions over that period as well for 147 yards. So he's been underwhelming. But when you think about the receiving core at the Detroit Lions, they are commanding the lion's share of that. So 68 targets between all wide receivers at Detroit versus 14. So you're talking about 85% of the targets going to wide receivers. So is Sam Laporta just an afterthought now, right? Like, or is it just a sophomore slump, as they say? When you're a rookie, you come into the second year and you're not expecting to get the same production because teams key on you, right? They've got that tape the whole year. And, you know, some people actually fight through that sophomore slump, but we're seeing it with Sam Laporta. So I think it'd be hard to sell Laporta at this stage because, like I was saying with Bijan, are you going to get the return now? Because all you're now thinking is the upside on the potential of actually selling him off, and it'd be off the back of their total offense because their offense is explosive. It's you know, there's a lot to go around, but there's a lot of mouths to feed as well when you've got a 2-headed running back there with Gibbs and Montgomery. So I don't know. Laporta, tight end 1 going into the season, pretty underwhelming so far.
I think you answered your own question there. I think the inclusion, well, it's not really an inclusion, but the health and the uptick in production very, very early of Jameson Williams has hindered Sam Laporta's production. And not just that, like Jameson Williams offers something that the Lions offense didn't have last year. He's explosive. He's like a line breaker, let's say. So he's definitely something different. And like to work in the middle and so forth, Amon-Ra is going to be that guy. So Sam Laporta is going to need to find new ways or new routes or whatever to try and get himself into the game. Otherwise, you're going to have the same production week in, week out.
Any other hits or anyone else underwhelming that pops off the charts, boys?
For me, there's one massive hit. If we're looking inside the top 3 rounds, Nico Collins is, I think, the biggest hit in the first 3 rounds. He's currently wide receiver 1. I mean, I didn't think it. Like I was phasing him out in every single draft. I thought, okay, they paid him, but I thought Tank Dell had that connection with CJ Stroud, so that was going to influence it. Then Stephon Diggs and so forth. And a lot of the production that Nico Collins had last year was on very, very few receptions. I think it was like he probably, like out of all the top 10 wide receivers, he had the fewest targets. Right? So I thought if it was going to stay the same, there was no way he will have anywhere near a top 10 production this year. And boy, was I wrong, because he is everything to CJ Stroud this year. And it shows in his scores by being the outright number 1 wide receiver at the moment.
Yeah, I must say, going off that Texans offense, Tank Dell has been quite disappointing. again, from a personal standpoint, because I've got him rostered in our main league, albeit he has missed a game as well. But it's definitely the Nico Collins show, and to a lesser extent, Stephon Diggs. Dell, he gets his 5 or 6 targets a game, but we definitely have not seen what he produced last year. Will it happen? Potentially. I mean, and touch wood, I never wish injuries on any player, but if one of those players were to go down, I think Tank Dell would feature quite heavily. But yeah, Nico has been amazing.
Yeah, I've come across a couple of the Texans games, but if Tank Dell, he looks to me to be like a slot receiver, so I don't know where they're playing him at the moment, but maybe the inclusion of Stephon Diggs in that offense has probably limited his production there. So I didn't really value Tank Dell. Like if he was going to be there in the later rounds and he was available for me, I would have picked him up. Yeah, Nico Collins, he's actually surprised me a little bit because I thought Stephon would be the man there. So I didn't really understand the projections going into this fantasy. Yeah, why Nico Collins was going to be the highest projected drafted player at the Texans over Stephon Diggs, considering how the Texans acquired him and how the league views Stephon Diggs. Like, he's that outside wide receiver threat when he was at Minnesota, when he was at the Bills. So, he surprised me in a good way, because I actually have him in one of my leagues. So, wide receiver 1, just on the back of Yen. Comment there. So, wide receiver 1, 43 targets, 76 points over that period, half PPR league over the last 4 weeks, according to Fantasy Pros. So, it's been a great quarter for Nico Collins and that offense. If you don't have anything else, boys, we'll move on to the next segment. And we're going to start them off with, have you got anyone you need to spray? Just anyone you need to spray. Is there someone you need to spray?
I actually don't have anyone this week.
No more Caleb Williams spraying? He had an okay game this week.
He didn't. No, he
did. They won. They won.
He didn't have a good game. He had
150-odd
yards.
Yeah, I must admit though, like when I saw, I think about halfway through the second quarter, like he had 18 yards passing in that game, and I was like, oh, geez. But he did ramp it up. He had a better second.
You know what? Speaking of like arrogance, Baker Mayfield, what an arrogant little prick that guy is. Like, did you hear what he said after the win? After I came in, it was a different atmosphere. I made it like more fun and enjoyable to play football again. What is that? Like, so winning championships is not fun, is it? You'd rather sit there and have a good time and play with yourself after you score a touchdown. Like, okay, continue doing that and being mediocre because that's what you've been for the entirety of your career. But I also like Tom Brady's retort where he said, well, I thought championships were like winning championships was fun. And that's all he had to say. And then he had the audacity to come out and say my comments were taken out of context. No, they were not. You said what you had to say, and now you've got backlash for looking like an arrogant little so-and-so, and it's come back to bite you because you've achieved nothing as the number 1 pick so far.
Yeah. For someone that didn't have anyone to spray, you just sprayed someone. It was Baker Mayfield.
Because it's kind of irked me because like I was just reflecting on it the last couple of hours because I was just watching some like NFL type stuff, and that popped up again. And it just like, who does he think he is? Like, you're a literal nobody, and you've been blessed in a great situation right now. And okay, the Bucks are playing well. Is it sustainable? We will see. But right now, you've achieved nothing. You haven't won a division or anything, but you're sitting here chirping, and no one's put you in as a favorite to win the NFC or even go to a Super Bowl. But here you're talking about, I've made it all fun. But like 2-3 years ago, they were winning Super Bowls and contending for the NFC. Shut up.
And you got anyone to spray, G?
Not anyone that I haven't already. I mean, I'm not going to keep harping on about Mark Andrews. All I'm going to say about that situation is apparently Harbaugh came out today after his presser and said that we're going to get Andrews the ball a lot more moving forward. Okay, well let's see. It's not really a spray. Like I'm just over it by this point. So I'm just happy those words have been uttered. But the proof will be in the pudding. So no one really to spray. For me, it's just about waiting and seeing what actually happens.
Andrews gets a spray 2 weeks in a row, man. And Mark, mate, you want to have a look at this guy, mate. He's after you, mate. He's coming after you.
Well, I mean, look, if you really want me to have a crack, like he had one target. One for the whole game. Wide open. Lamar. Beautiful pass. Straight to his hands. What does he do? Starts turning upfield before he's caught the ball and drops it. It's like, mate, 2 weeks in a row you've given me a donut. All right, I got the win this week. But if I was in Yen's situation with Ken Walker needing 1.5 points or whatever it was, that could have been the catch that got me the win. Like, seriously, regardless of what's happened so far to this point, just do better. I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed.
Oh, it sounds like dad to son talk, mate. That's Look, I've got some.
Speaking of disappointment as well, the Atlanta Falcons need to really lighten up because not sure what's happening with their offense. They had a top 5 offensive line, and their offense is shocking. Now, is it the Kevin O'Connell thing with Kirk Cousins? Because he looks horrific. Bijan looks like he's got no confidence. Drake London looks like, I don't know, like I think whatever concerns we had preseason about him and his production, I think it's justified because he has done nothing to show that he was a first-round talent like he was a couple of seasons ago. So the Falcons really need to start switching things up offensively before they lose the division and they are not contending for the playoffs.
I think they're going to be, as I said, possibly last week or the week after, I think they're going to be a bit of a slow burn. London has been okay. He hasn't been fantastic, but the volume is definitely there for him. It's more like when I actually look back and I think I saw 12 targets for 6 catches. So the volume's definitely there for him. And it will be for Bijan as well. I just think it's going to be a bit more of a slow burn. They're doing enough to be thereabouts with the division. I think you'll probably find that they will come on at some point properly and probably get a good run at it. So, but the spray's there. It's warranted for now.
What about Kyle Pitts? He had the highest draft grade of any player in the last 20 years. That's what it was.
For a tight end. Like tight end, he was picked number 4 for a tight end.
Yeah. The highest draft grade. This guy, they thought he was a prodigy. Going to be like the best NFL football player ever. He's literally turned into that ex who tells you, yeah, she's going to change and everything's going to be better next time. And they just end up disappointing you time and time again. He's a virtual no-show every single week.
3 targets for 0 this week.
Donuts. Absolute donuts.
Yeah, it's not good. Not good if you own him in fantasy leagues, that's for sure.
Look, I'm going to have to double up from last week, mate. But if I tell you who my 2 wide receivers are in one of my leagues, and if I told you without even thinking about what their production is over the last 4 weeks, if I told you, just thinking about the names, right? If I just told you who they were, wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 on my roster right now, Garrett Wilson and Brandon Aiyuk. My Lord. Wide receiver 43, Garrett Wilson, and wide receiver 61, Brandon Aiyuk, right? What the fudge is going on in those respective offenses, right? Where you have to have that level of production to be after 4 weeks to have 23 points over the first 4 weeks for Brandon Aiyuk and 33 points for Garrett Wilson. Now, I'm not going to talk about Garrett Wilson too much, but Brandon Aiyuk, mate, come on. When I thought I had that first reception where he caught 38 yards, that this is going to be a precursor for the rest of this game, right? Now, I don't know how the rest of the game developed, but whether Gonzalez was actually on him for the rest of the game and just manning up on him, or whether Gonzalez went to Juwan Jennings. But, mate, whoever was that wide receiver, whoever was that cornerback actually guarding Aiyuk, could the Patriots have just kept them on him? Like, one reception for their yards, and in this game he had 5.8 points to close out the game as wide receiver one at the 49ers. Is he wide receiver one, or was Debo wide receiver one there? Or was Juwan Jennings? Because it seems like there's a bit of a controversy there. Because when you hear Debo Samuels and Aiyuk, you think wide receiver one, wide receiver two, and they could be interchangeable. But mate, Aiyuk, you got paid in this offseason. You're not performing like a wide receiver number one. You're about to get benched for Jameson Williams, who's sitting on my bench at the moment. And if you don't perform while Jameson Williams is on bye this week, because you have the opportunity to turn it around for me, mate, you're going down. You're getting relegated to the bench, mate. Aiyuk, you're on notice, mate. There's a spray for you 2 weeks in a row. Do better, mate. Do better.
A bit of spit building up too. That's how.
Absolutely, mate. It's just rolling underneath my tongue, mate. I had to swallow it back in. Far out.
Well, I think with Brandon Aiyuk, it's all in his name, isn't it? It's all about so all about himself. So
yes,
he had a bit of a tantrum during the week because he was wearing the incorrect shorts, and Shanahan told him to change. I think it's all about me, Brandon Aiyuk. Literally, it's all in his name. And all right, Gonzalez was on him for a large portion of that game, granted. But man, his route running just looks so lazy and laconical. Like, it just looks like he's just not trying. It's really frustrating. As a 49ers supporter, you ask the question, Deebo Samuel is the clear number one. Then you could probably say George Kittle. But then after that, Juwan Jennings has surpassed him. Because Aiyuk has just become a lazy no-show.
I think lazy is the key word. Why does he need to work hard now? He's been paid.
He doesn't. It's almost fully guaranteed as well, almost. But still, he's making $30 million a year to do virtually nothing. It's disappointing. I didn't think he'd be that type of player, but obviously it is. So he worked hard to get his contract, and now he's turned into the Jamarcus Russell of wide receivers.
Yeah, $30 million a year to wear red shorts and crack the shits when your coach says take them off. I mean, seriously.
First world problems, mate. First world problems.
If I was Shanahan after that, I would have benched him for the whole game to make a statement. Seriously, put him on the bench for a week, let him think about what he did, and then bring him back if he wants to be serious. Because I'm sorry for yourself, Fred, first of all, owning Aiyuk, but there is no way Jennings is going to not be a thing in that offense moving forward. It's too late. The bus, that boat, whatever you want to say, has left the station.
Thanks, boys.
I would have made him play. I would have made him play and made him play every snap, and just made him run block the entire game or pass block. Not feature at all, just punish him. You're just blocking the entire game. That's what I would have done to him. He's getting paid regardless, so whether he sits out or not, he's getting his game check. So make him play and make him just block, make him just do the dirtiest work all game. That's what I would have done to him.
Yeah, this segment's like a shrink session, right? We just like exercise our demons here for fantasy. Like it's actually good. I actually feel a bit lighter now, just letting it out. But man, like just to go back to my fantasy team, like I've got 2 wide receivers that are outside the top 40 after the first 4 weeks, outside the top 50 if you're talking about Aiyuk. And I've got Jameson Williams that's sitting on my bench, who's wide receiver 14, right? Like, I like it knowing that I've got that nugget there. But man, and you've got this week to turn it around. Who are the Niners got? Not too sure. I'm sure we'll cover that. But it would be interesting to see whether he turns it around in this next quarter of the season. Because if not, I'm trading into someone. Maybe for Jayden Reed.
For a bag of bones. Bag of bones.
Oh, thanks, guys. I feel a bit lighter now. Just spraying, and having that shrink session, guys. So, but the other side of it is, whilst you got to spray other people, you also go to show some remorse and apologize as well. So, is there anybody that you think that you should apologize to after the first 4 weeks of this NFL season? Who wants to do it first?
I think you two have a massive apology to a particular Ravens player, don't you?
What? Yes, I know. I just refusing to recognize it. Acknowledge it. Yeah, look, I'll eat some crow on that. After probably the first week, Ravens, crow, yeah. Good one. Yeah, I thought after the first week, maybe even after the second week, I don't know if this Ravens offense, because they were 0-2, we're going to kick into gear, particularly with Henry and his running style and the offenses that he's been a part of, particularly with Tennessee. When you're running I-form and power formations, I don't know if that was actually built into the Ravens offense. But you can see it now. You can really see it now that they are running Henry into the ground now. They're running him in pistol formation, right, which is unusual, but it kind of works. And he scooted away for almost 200 yards rushing on the ground against the Bills D, who were 3-0 going into this game. So apologies to Derrick Henry. I will back away and just nod my head in many apologies, sincere apologies. Not only just Derrick Henry, too, I actually want to apologize to the 58 subscribers as well. Before the season, I said that I was bullish on the Tennessee Titans and their offense. Do you remember that? We can play the tape because it's actually recorded, right? Do you remember that, right?
Roll the tape, Si.
Roll the tape, right? I'm actually really bullish on the Titans this year.
Oh, no. Really?
Yeah, a little bit. Only because I'm familiar with this certain coach who came from the AFC North, which is Brian Callahan. He's known to be a bit of a quarterback whisperer, and I think he might take Will Levis to another level. I'm not saying it's going to be that elite level, but he might take him up a notch. So I can't quantify it because I'm kind of having that similar feeling with Jordan Love with the Packers last year as well. I think they'll have the system in place at the Titans there.
I will say, I think they're going to be a dumpster fire.
I'm with Yen. I don't think they're going to win too many games.
And I said I was bullish on them, right? Now, they got the win today, which is great. Great for they're 1-3 now, and the Dolphins go into oblivion. But it wasn't off the back of Will Levis. Mason Rudolph passed for a touchdown and actually rushed in 2 touchdowns as well, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe you have to fact check that one. But he did enough for the Titans to win the game. But the Titans offense and Will Levis going into this game, he was leading all quarterbacks in terms of turnovers. He had 8 turnovers over the first 3 weeks going into this game, and he had another turnover before he went out with an AC joint, shoulder sprain, whatever it may be. I am apologizing to the 58 subscribers because I made a very, very misinformed call. And I said Brian Callahan was a quarterback whisperer. And if I'm Brian Callahan whispering into Will Levis's ear, it'd be like, "You're shit, mate. You're not a good quarterback, mate. Just we're gonna start Mason Rudolph for the rest of the season." That's what I'd be whispering, right? But mate, I'm sorry. If you had to hear that, I will eat my crow on the Titans. But I wish for their success.
Anyone, Yen?
Don't expect me to apologise for anything. I got nothing to say.
Well, one apology it is. But I mean, look, it's a pretty big one. For someone to start off fairly slowly, albeit I think he scored a touchdown a game, Henry, if I'm not mistaken. But man, the last 2 weeks, 199 yards just in this last game. They don't call him King Henry for nothing. So I think the offense and the life has been sparked into that team, and I think this is going to be their momentum going forward now. So look out for anyone who has to play the Ravens anytime soon.
Awesome. I might have to... I was incorrect on that. So Mason Rudolph, 85 yards he passed in this game, but the touchdowns were from the running backs against the Titans. So I was incorrect with the rushing touchdowns. I thought I read that somewhere, but that's on me. Cool. If there's no apologies, we'll go to Week 5 previews. We'll close this pod out. So the first one is Thursday Night Football, Bucks at Falcons. NFC South showdown. Bucks and the Falcons both coming off wins, I think. I know the Bucks won, but any thoughts, guys? And anyone that you must start in this game from a fantasy production, and your thoughts?
I think from memory, Mike Evans traditionally has big games against the Falcons. if I'm not mistaken, I think I've seen many a time where Evans has gone absolutely bananas against the Falcons in this division game. So, talking about must starts, I really, really like Evans in this game, or Godwin for that matter, who's having a very good season as well. But I think that Mike Evans being Mike Evans, and I know that the Falcons have got some very good corners, but I actually think that Mike Evans is the one in this game. He is a must start.
Well, last year they did split. They went 1-1. Look, I don't see how you can tip the Falcons considering how they have played. Their defense has been elite. Having said all that, and their secondary is very good. So I don't know if it's a foregone conclusion that you can actually start Mike Evans. Obviously, you have to because he's in your team, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be having his usual production. I think if anyone's going to actually star in this game, it's probably going to be Chris Godwin because he's going to be working the slot. And I feel like that secondary is going to hone in on Mike Evans. He does usually have a good game, but this secondary unit is just different this year with their inclusions. And also, I think you can potentially flex, and it'll be a high risk move if you did this, is Bucky Irving, because as I mentioned, weeks and weeks and weeks in Rashad White just can't get it done. On the ground, he's just not a very good runner, and Bucky Irving just looks a lot better. Do you start anyone from the Falcons? I don't know. I guess you have to start Bijan, but again, the run defense for the Buccaneers is very good as well. I think the safest option is going to be Chris Godwin, and I think the Buccaneers are going to win. Maybe by a score, like 7 points, I reckon.
Well, just touching on wide receivers, I mean, the Saints obviously played the Falcons this last week, and they allowed Chris Olave and Shaheed to have 87 and 83 yards respectively. I mean, I know that's not huge amounts, but they both had 8 catches as well. So they might have some quality. Cornerbacks, but I think the better receivers, and I think we would all agree that Evans and Godwin are probably better than Olave and Shaheed. I think they might eat into those yards a little bit further than those two personally. But I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah, the Atlanta Falcons defense, and I've been really bullish on the Atlanta Falcons defense because of their personnel and their acquisitions over the last 2 years. But from a fantasy perspective, they're actually ranked 18 as a defense as a whole. So they're not really getting to the quarterback, particularly when they've got Judon on one side. They've got Grady Jarrett in the interior, although he's a bit long in the tooth. So they've 4 sacks, 3 interceptions, 25 points, so averaging about 5 a game, so just under 5 points a game, according to Fantasy Pros over the first 4 weeks. So fantasy is a bit different, but schematically they might man up against the Bucs there. But Evans and Godwin, from what I saw this week against that Eagle secondary, were just phenomenal. And even Godwin, as you touched on before, wide receiver 6 for the season so far, and scoring anywhere between 15 to 20 points a game. So he's doing really well from that standpoint. So you got complementary football in the wide receiver core at the Bucs, and it's been the case for years and years. So any tips here, guys? I think I'm going to take the Bucs in a tight game.
Yeah, I think the Bucs too. I think they're just in that little bit better form at the moment, and the QB play from Baker Mayfield, although he was a bit of a dick this week, I think that will be the telling factor.
Yeah, like I said, I think the Bucs will win, and I think it's going to be by about a touchdown.
Yep, consensus here. I think the Bucs will take it, and I think it'll be 3 points. Be closer than your call, but yeah, I think we will have the Bucs winning. Bills at Texans.
I mean, where do you go with this game? They're both 3-1. We thought the Bills were virtually invincible. Well, I thought they were last week. I mean, if I'm honest, I thought they were close to untouchable. I thought they looked flawless in all their games, but then they put out a performance such as this. Now, the Texans' D isn't as good as Baltimore's. Well, they're good. They're serviceable. I don't think they're going to put the type of pressure that Baltimore has. I'm expecting defense is going to go out the window in this particular game. Don't know why, but from what I've seen from the Buffalo D, they can be exposed. And what I've seen from Houston's defense as well, especially how they performed against Minnesota 2 weeks ago, they can be exposed as well. And considering the worst team in football put 20 points up against them this week as well, is also concerning. So I expect a high scoring affair. It was great to see CJ Stroud. He's my boy. I've been riding his coattails since he's entered the league, since about week 2 last week. Sorry, last year, I should say. It was great to see how he was virtually perfect this week in terms of his accuracy and his game management and also scoring 2 touchdowns. But I think this is going to be a relatively high scoring affair. I don't know who's going to win. It's literally a toss of the coin. In terms of fantasy, Nico Collins is your safest bet. You just ride that wave and keep going until it crashes. Do not consider anything else. And if Tank Dell comes back, just bench him because he has been a virtual no-show. And you see the rapport that he's actually building with Stephon Diggs as well. Diggs had a pretty good game last week as well, with about 10 receptions. So I think if you need a flex option and you got him, you can start Stephon Diggs as well.
I think that if the Jags were able to put up 20 points against the Texans, I think this is actually a danger game, personally, for the Texans against the Bills. And I actually think James Cook is going to have a field day because Tank Bigsby and ETN, even though ETN wasn't super efficient, still 4.5 a clip. Tank Bigsby, when he was on the field, shredded them for 90 yards from 7 carries. I understand that 58 of those yards came from one, but then obviously breaking that down, it's 6 from 32. I actually think the run game is going to wear down the Texans in this game from what I saw the Jags do. So I actually think the Bills will win this one by about a touchdown, and I think James Cook might be a very good start option this week.
I'm uncertain about this one because it's like a get-right game for the Bills after their showing against the Ravens. And then Houston, they lost the week before and now have got a win against their divisional foe and then coming back into this one. This one's a toss-up for me. This is actually a lot closer than you think it would be. Look, I'm going to go Houston here by 3. Just. I'm going to lean on the run game that Houston are going to have, particularly if Joe Mixon comes back and if he gets the same production from the first 2 weeks when he was healthy. If he does come back, and what I saw, I'm not saying that I'm not saying Joe Mixon is Derrick Henry, but if we can see a similar run game where that O-line for Houston, which is pretty good itself, can actually dominate that line of scrimmage against the Bills, I think Houston might control that line and then get CJ Stroud open up the play action, and then get Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs open there. So if it is a must start, and I'm just going to pivot it a little bit out here, like Nico Collins, yes, is a must start. Stephon Diggs, yes, is a must start, of course. But I'd say Joe Mixon, just because of that run defense that the Bills showed against Derrick Henry last week. He might be a sneaky start if he is healthy coming back into the fold.
Can I just say this? If we're looking in terms of total yards given up, Houston is still 6th in total defense. So they've given up 261.3 yards per game. If you compare it to Buffalo, it's 321.8. And now if you're also looking in terms of rushing yards, all right, they didn't have a good game this week, but they're giving 112 yards per game, the Texans, compared to the Bills of 156.5. And then points-wise, it's almost virtually the same. The Texans are giving 23.5 points per game to the Bills 20.5. So it's literally a toss. Like I said, it's a 50-50 game. And both Ds are not performing too well. I mean, if you're looking in terms of total yards, the Texans are probably doing a little bit better. But yeah, at the same time, I couldn't pick a winner in this game.
Yeah, Houston Texans defense from a fantasy perspective ranked 20th, right? But they are getting to the quarterback because they've got 14 sacks over the season so far. So they're up there in terms of sacks, and I reckon they'd probably be top 5 in terms of sacks, so equal top 5, which I can see that the Seahawks and the Niners are up there. So they are getting to the quarterback. But yeah, at being the 20th defense ranked overall at 24 points, they're only scoring 6 points a game on average. So Underwhelming relative to how they actually get into the quarterback there. But I think their run D will be tested, and similarly on the other side too with the Bills. Guys, next game we'll go to Ravens Bengals. Okay, thoughts?
I've only got one thought, and that's Derrick Henry's going to have another huge game against this defense.
I'll second that, and I think we should move to the resident Bengals fan here because he's going to have more insight than us. But I mean, if you're going off what the Ravens have done and Henry's done over the last 2 weeks, I think it's going to be a long, long day for Cincinnati.
Yeah, I'll second that. I think Derrick Henry will have a great game, but in his last 2 outings against the Bengals when he was at the Titans, he was actually held in check, and they were both playoff games, I think. No, one was a playoff game, one was a regular season game. So we know how to play him, but the Bengals did have DJ Reader on their defensive line, who was considered one of the most premier nose tackles in the game, who's now at the Lions, and we are sorely missing him because he used to take on double teams, which would then free up one-on-one on the line, and then linebackers would just shoot through and just close the gaps against opposing run offenses there. So, yes, he's going to have a field day. There's talks that BJ Hill, who's our starting defensive tackle, will be back, and he's decent. He's decent enough. He's probably better than what we've got at the moment that's coming off our bench. And Sheldon Rankins as well, who's a bit of a journeyman in this league, but he's had a couple of decent seasons because he was hampered with I think a knee injury a couple of years ago, and he had a really good season with the Texans on a 1-year deal, but they couldn't retain the services, so he's come over to the Bengals. But he's more considered as a pass rusher, Sheldon Rankins, not as a run defender, but if he does come back, which I think he won't be, I think Derrick Henry will have a field day. But as I said before earlier in this podcast, for the Bengals to win this game, they need to control offense. They need to not kick field goals when they're in the red zone. They need to convert those opportunities into points, and I mean converting on 4th downs. Like it has to be that type of game. For the way I saw the Ravens run the ball, pass the ball on the Bills this past week, and to score 30 plus points to win that game against a very good Bills team, the Bengals are not going to stop that offense defensively. Like if you're not getting the pass rush up forward, and Trey Hendrickson is apparently under an injury cloud as well because he went out with a stinger, so a neck injury. So that's the only pass rushing option on the Bengals defensive line. If that is missing, you are giving Lamar Jackson an extra couple of seconds in that pocket to, if it's not downfield, he'll just shoot the gap and just run it for 10 yards and get the first down. So it could be that kind of day. And if you have to let them score, the Bengals just need to, when they get the ball back, they need to go down and score and just it'd be a shootout. They have to actually engage in the shootout against the Ravens. They're not going to, I don't see them where they stop them defensively unless there's ill-advised throws by Lamar or he fumbles the ball running out of the pocket and he gets absolutely blasted by Logan Wilson or Jermaine Pratt chasing him down. But look, it may surprise you here, but I'm actually going to tip a Bengals win against the Ravens at home because they need to. Only that, purely that. First home game, they've lost 2 of their home games in the first 4 weeks of the season. They cannot drop another home game, and they cannot drop another game in the conference or in the. This is their first division game. They can't drop their first game against the division, and then especially when it's in the conference too, because they've lost against the Patriots and the Chiefs as well. So they're behind in the conference. So they need to win. So I'm going to tip the Bengals. Close one. 3 points. Field goal.
Well, you're keen. I think the Ravens will win by 10 plus comfortably. I just cannot see an avenue where the Bengals will actually be able to keep up, personally, especially the way that the Ravens defense were awoken against the Bills. Sorry, man. I think it's going to be 10 minimum.
Don't be sorry. Offensively, I'm not worried about the Bengals. They've got time in the pocket now. Like I see it. Like it's like Burrow's got time in the pocket. He's playing really well. He's seeing the field. Awesome. Chase, T. Higgins being there on the other side is freeing up Chase one-on-one. He's not getting double teamed like he was in the first 2 weeks. Chase Brown could be a bit of an X factor too, if they can get him involved somehow. But that run defense against James Cook over this last game gives me pause, a little bit of concern if you're a Bengals fan. So they've got to work him in a little bit there. So yeah. I am keen. It's a bit out there considering I tipped against them against Carolina coming off that loss against the Commanders. We'll move on to the next one. Cardinals at Niners. Yen, as the resident Niners man, any thoughts, must starts?
I think this should be a relatively comfortable game for the 49ers. Look, offensively, the Arizona Cardinals are not bad. They are able to put up points and so forth, but defensively, they're not very good at all. And you can run the ball on them at will, right? So expect Jordan Mason to have a very good game. Having said all that, we do usually have a problem with scrambling quarterbacks. And Kyler Murray, even though we have been able to best them, he does usually put up some good scores and does produce quite well. But at the same time, I don't think he's going to be able to put up enough points to be able to contend against the 49ers. And I have to say, like, I've bagged him because I don't think he's quite that good or that guy. But this year, Brock Purdy has been very good. And his escapability from the pocket, he's got great speed, which is I didn't expect. And he's just taking more chances, more downfield chances, which is also great to see as well. I wish we had utilized that more last February, but it wasn't to be. So I think Jordan Mason, if you manage to pick him up, is an absolute must start. I reckon he's easily going to go for over 100 yards. And then also Deebo Samuel will also have another good game. He was a little bit quiet this week. He still had a couple of big plays. Look for him to have, let's say, a bounce back game from that injury he had for the last 2 weeks.
Can I just on the top of that, you're saying Jordan Mason. Jordan Mason, this is how now you're the resident Niners man, right? But Jordan Mason is number one in terms of rushing attempts in the season. Right, he has 91 rushing attempts. Alvin Kamara is second at 80. So he has 11 more rushing attempts. So the focus there of getting Jordan Mason involved is definitely much there. So there hasn't been a step back if McCaffrey was there. So your offense has pretty much held to be a heavy rushing attack. And just on Brock Purdy himself, he looks like he's got a bit more arm strength this season as well. So it doesn't look like his ball is actually floating as much. Like you can see a little bit more velocity. So that was just an observation I made in this last week against that win that they had. So also to note too, Yen as well, the Niners, their defense ranked 5th overall in terms of fantasy according to Fantasy Pros here. They are getting to the quarterback. They have 14 sacks of the season, but you guys are number one in terms of forced fumbles for the season. You got 7 on the season, 2 more than the next best, which is the New Orleans Saints. So there must be something happening there with your defense where you're going after the ball. So it's 2 forced fumbles a game. So, yeah, interesting.
Well, considering they lost Javon Hargrave for the year, Hufunga's out for who knows how long, and Fred Warner is now out, they're good stats to have. The secondary actually does look a lot better as a unit as well, which is great to see.
Any thoughts on Cardinals Niners, Jake?
I think all points have been dotted and crossed, I guess. Mason should have a fairly good game. The Cardinals' run D is not good at all, which we've obviously already said. So I guess we've mentioned everything sort of 49ers, but I mean, if you do have some investments in the Cardinals players, I think really I can't see James Conner doing anything good against that D-line. So probably Marvin Harrison and Trey McBride have been the obvious ones to start this week, that they're going to have to keep up with the scoring. So I think those two will be featured quite heavily.
Trey McBride, because Fred Warner's out, right? Like that's your coverage linebacker is your best linebacker, in a coverage sense. He's gone. And so that might open, up the seams for Trey McBride to actually feast against a Fred Warner-less defense at the Niners there. That's a big out. Fred Warner. Jeez.
What actually happened to him?
His ankle. So he didn't come on probably for much of the second half at all.
That's how good the Patriots were going.
Okay, for me, just quickly, Niners. Without a shadow of a doubt. Be 7+ points. Cowboys, Steelers, Sunday Night Football. This is the old rivalry when the Cowboys were making Super Bowls and they were winning Super Bowls against the Steelers. So they keep rehashing this one, but the Cowboys haven't seen a Super Bowl since the 90s. So I understand the history behind it, but Cowboys Steelers, like every time I see a Cowboys game on prime time, I do switch off. Sorry to the Cowboys fans. It's just, yeah, you're always there when the lights are shining brighter, but for some reason I just can't get behind you. Cowboys, Steelers, guys. Any thoughts?
I think the Steelers are going to get the win in this one. And I think we need to give a little bit more praise for how Justin Fields has started the season too, from a fantasy point of view, but also basically keeping his job. I mean, it's still yet to be said that Wilson was going to be the QB1 before he strained his calf before the season started. But Fields has been pretty good. He's been pretty serviceable, I think. Obviously, we mentioned earlier about Parsons and Lawrence being out now. Deron Bland is already out. I actually think that the Steelers will get the win against the Cowboys this week. I don't see how the Cowboys offense is going to be able to handle the Steelers D, who have been also very good. I don't think it'll be high scoring, but I think it will be a very Steelers-type game where they just grind out a win, another win for Mike Tomlin.
Steelers, grind it out. Yeah.
Interesting game. It does sound like it will be a Steelers grind-out game. I don't know what to really say about these two teams because, look, the Steelers are not dynamic. You can't really write anything home about them offensively. It's good to see that connection between George Pickens and Fields is slowly starting to develop. Fields is getting a lot of yards. He's just not getting the touchdown production that you would like to see. And Najee Harris is just Najee Harris. Nothing too spectacular. Gets his 3.5 yards per attempt. But having said that, if that defense has to just contend with Rico Dowdle and Ezekiel Elliott, I think it's going to be quite easy to stop. I can see the Steelers get up early and then Dak Prescott will stat pad his stats and then they'll lose by about a field goal.
Yeah, Pittsburgh for me. I mean, offensively, nothing really stands out. As you're saying, Najee, he's actually out of the top 30 in terms of fantasy points for the season. So he's running at 3.5 yards a clip. So nothing really to write home about. And their wide receivers, in terms of fantasy, George Pickens is just inside the top 40 at wide receiver 38. I think Pittsburgh will get the win, particularly after the loss they had over this past week, which puts them into 3-1. I think George Pickens will be a must start here, particularly of the outs in the secondary that Gino mentioned before too. So I think this is a game for George Pickens to get right. He does play well in primetime. I've noticed that when he plays in primetime, particularly divisional games, he does actually show up. So I'm going to ride that trend because he did have a game, I think, 150 yards against the Bengals last year, I think, in primetime. So I'm going to ride that trend and see if he goes off again. And this should be a get-right game for George Pickens because you would have taken him in the first, say, 6 to 7 rounds, I reckon, in this past draft. And I've taken him in one of my leagues as well, but he's been riding the bench because there's nothing that shows me that he's going to get the production there. But he is wide receiver 1 at Pitt. And as you were saying, Ian, that if Justin Fields and himself are building a connection there, so hopefully it's a sign to come, but not at the expense of the Bengals. Thank you very much. It's just, we'll keep him in check. So Pittsburgh for me, I think they'll win by a touchdown at home. Mike Tomlin would just do his thing, grind them out, play okay offense, but then just defensively, they'll just shut them out. Yep, Pittsburgh. And the last game of our preview is Saints at Chiefs. Monday Night Football. Another primetime game for the Chiefs again, which means more shots of Mrs. Swift sitting in the box without, what's her name? Brittany Mahomes. Whatever happened in the offseason, she's just not there anymore. Mine being like a post she liked or something like that, so they can't be seen together. Like, come on. Give me a spell. Anyways, Saints, Chiefs, Monday Night Football. This should be an easy one.
I don't know if it's going to be easy with Rashee Rice out now. Personally, he was leading the Chiefs. I heard a stat today. I think he was leading the Chiefs in targets and had 29 for the season before he got injured. There's no other receiver on the Chiefs team that has double-digit receptions. That's a massive hole. Is it going to be Xavier Worthy that steps up? Yes, he's going to have to. We obviously have touched on Travis Kelce a number of times this year in terms of how old he looks. He's going to have to step it up, but can he? For me, there's actually a few questions here, and I actually think this is a trap game for the Chiefs. I would not be surprised if the Saints beat them personally. I don't know by how much, but I think the exclusion of Rice is going to be a massive thing for the Chiefs moving forward, and they're already down Pacheco too. So I'm going to call a trap game here, and I'm going to go the Saints in an upset.
Love it.
Until it's actually done, I don't think I'm going to pick against the Kansas City Chiefs. If you're looking at it in totality, defensively, they are solid. I think Chris Jones and that D-line is going to get to Derek Carr. I think they're going to shut out Alvin Kamara because he is their best weapon. And if anyone can take out your best weapon, it's going to be Spags. So I think it's going to be quite a close game. I think it's going to be quite a low-scoring game. But I think the Kansas City Chiefs are going to revert back to an old playbook, and they're going to lean on Kelce. They're going to start finding him a little bit more, which they started doing this week. And he did look decent. And I think they're going to lean on Kareem Hunt, and they'll take the occasional deep shot here and there. So I think they're going to grind out a win, and I think they might win by about a field goal. But I can also see Alvin Kamara also being neutralized because that's what Spags does.
Yeah, they offensively, the Kansas City Chiefs don't look like the powerhouse offensively that we're used to seeing in years past, particularly when they're back-to-back Super Bowls. They're going for the treble here. And when you look at them from a fantasy perspective, when you talk about quarterback to tight end, right, they're middle of the pack, right? So Patrick Mahomes is QB 16 after the first 4 weeks, which is kind of about your expectation should be within the top 5, but in terms of how he's looked, if you look at him just how he's looked, he doesn't look like a top 10 quarterback, doesn't look like a top 5 quarterback. He's actually looked subpar to his level, but his par would have a high ceiling versus other quarterbacks. But to what we know of Patrick Mahomes at the moment, he doesn't look like the same as we see. But we did see him last year. They didn't have the greatest year, and they still won the Super Bowl. But if I look at quarterback, he's QB 16. When I look at running back, their best running back is Isaac Pacheco, who's now injured though, but Samaje Perine is running back 57. So where do these points come from, right? Wide receiver. Now, Rashee Rice is now out for the season with the ACL, so prayers to him. But then outside of him, you got Xavier Worthy, Justin Watson, McCole Hardman, all outside of the top 20. Matter of fact, actually quite deep when you go into Justin Watson, who's actually ranked 94th, and McCole Hardman 175. When you look at Kelce, who's the top, now he has actually ascended in terms of fantasy points, but when you talk about tight ends in general, it's actually a low bar because tight end points at the moment, the top tight end for fantasy is 42 points. And so that's Dallas Goedert, right? But then when you look at Kelce, he's scored 24 points for the season, right? He could easily call back tight end 1 with one big game, right? And this could be it. So when I look at these stats here from a fantasy perspective, where do the points come from? I think KC just know how to win, right? They just know how to grind out a win, right? Whether it be pretty or ugly or not, it doesn't stand out to me that KC have got the firepower to actually take out wins, but they're 4-0, and I see no reason why they can't be 5-0 after the 5th week. I'm taking KC here. I think they will get Kelce back into the fold. I think he'll have a big game. He'll insert himself as in the top 5 for tight ends for after week 5. I'm going KC 7+ points. And that's the last game that we're going to preview. I don't think there's a second Monday Night Football game, is there? If you correct me if I'm wrong. So this is a one. Okay. The 2 Monday Night Game football format is kind of weird for me because you're kind of concentrating on both, but having the one, bit of a change of pace there. But that's all we have time for, guys. So this is week 4 of the 3-Man Coverage podcast. I'm Freddie. This is Yen. This is Gino. Please follow us on Instagram. Please follow us on Facebook, X, YouTube, and on TikTok as well. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. 3-Man Coverage podcast. Freddie, Yen, and Gino. To all our 58 subscribers, have a good night. Take care.